Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going backstage with your body, kinda. We'll be using Netter's Atlas of Human Anatomy
Ooh, yeah.
as our guide, and trust me, um, it's way more exciting than a regular anatomy book.
Yeah,
Think incredibly detailed illustrations that make these complex structures totally come to life.
it's true. Netter's Atlas is like having X-ray vision. It's used by medical professionals and students everywhere.
Exactly, and we're going to focus on the head and neck today. You use these parts of your body constantly, but have you ever thought about what's going on under the surface?
Right.
We're talking about the muscles that let you express every emotion, from hangry to totally in love. We'll even touch on some emergency procedures that rely on knowing exactly where things are.
Uh-huh.
The kind of stuff that could actually save a life in a crisis.
It's remarkable how much is packed into these areas.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with some landmarks you can actually feel on yourself right now.
Okay.
No x-ray vision required.
Great idea. Place your fingers right at the front of your neck, and you'll find a little dip, the thyroid notch. That's like a little arrow pointing to something important, the C4 vertebra.
C4, got it. Okay, but why should I care about my C4 vertebra? It's not like it's my lucky number or anything.
Oh, it's lucky for your carotid arteries because C4 is where they split into the external and internal branches. It's also where you'll find the carotid sinus, which helps regulate your blood pressure, and the carotid body, keeping tabs on oxygen levels in your blood.
So it's like a grand central station for blood flow and oxygen monitoring. Not bad for a little notch in my neck.
Exactly. And speaking of important junctions, move your fingers down a bit until you feel a firm ring just below your Adam's apple. That's the cricoid cartilage.
Hold on, let me guess. It's the only complete ring of cartilage in the entire respiratory tract, right? I remember reading that somewhere.
That's right.
It's shaped like a signet ring.
And you're touching another key landmark. The lower edge of the cricoid cartilage lines up perfectly with the C6 vertebra.
Okay, 2 for 2. Is there something special happening at C6 too?
You bet. Remember those carotid arteries we were talking about? Well, you can actually feel your pulse right there at C6, at the front edge of that big muscle that runs down your neck, the sternocleidomastoid.
Now that you mention it, I've seen doctors and nurses check pulses there. It makes sense now why that spot is so important.
Yeah.
It's like they're tapping into the highway of blood flow. It's incredible to think that knowing these landmarks can actually be life-saving in emergencies.
Absolutely. In situations where someone can't breathe on their own, procedures like a tracheostomy or a needle cricothyrotomy can be performed.
Those sound intense. What exactly do they involve?
A tracheostomy creates an airway by making an incision through the skin and the front wall of the trachea, usually between the first and second tracheal rings.
Got it. But a needle cricothyrotomy is for when things are even more serious, right?
It is. It's a rapid way to get oxygen into the lungs when the upper airway is completely blocked. Remember the cricothyroid membrane we talked about?
Yeah.
That thin membrane between the thyroid and cricoid cartilages.
Uh-huh.
That's the target for a needle cricothyrotomy.
Yeah.
It's easily accessible and can be a real lifesaver.
That's incredible. And it all comes down to knowing the anatomy of the neck. It makes me think about other emergency procedures, like putting in a central line to deliver fluids or medication directly into the bloodstream.
You're right. Being able to quickly identify the landmarks around the sternocleidomastoid muscle and the clavicle, your collarbone, can be crucial for finding those big veins.
Yeah.
The subclavian vein, which is often used for central lines, sits right beneath the middle of your clavicle.
It's like a roadmap for doctors. So these seemingly simple bumps and grooves on our necks are actually critical for medical professionals.
Okay, ready to crack open the skull. Figuratively, of course.
Let's do it. The skull might look like one solid structure, but it's actually divided into 2 main parts. The neurocranium, which is the brain's protective case, and the viscerocranium, basically the bones of your face.
So it's like 2 separate construction projects that came together to form our head. That's a great way to think about it. And you know those tiny bones in your ear, the ones responsible for hearing?
Mm-hmm.
The malleus, infecus, and stapes?
Oh, yeah, the auditory ossicles. I remember being fascinated by them in school.
Yeah.
They're so tiny.
Well, here's a fact that might blow your mind. Those tiny bones are actually fully formed while a baby is still in the womb.
Wow.
They're the first bones to fully ossify, meaning they harden from cartilage into bone.
Wow, I never knew that. That means babies are hearing sounds even before they're born.
Yeah.
I wonder if they find their mom's voice soothing.
That's a great question. It brings up a whole other area of research, how sound affects fetal development.
We'll have to do a deep dive on that sometime. But for now, back to the skull. What about those soft spots on a baby's head?
Ah, the fontanelles.
No.
Those are spaces between the skull bones that haven't fused yet. You know the major sutures, those fibrous joints that connect the skull bones? They gradually close over time, but babies are born with those gaps.
So it's like a puzzle that's still coming together. Why are babies born with those gaps?
It allows their heads to squeeze through the birth canal during delivery. Imagine how difficult childbirth would be if their skulls were already completely fused.
That makes a lot of sense. And then over time, those gaps close up as the skull bones grow together.
Exactly. And that fusion is crucial for the skull's overall growth and strength. It protects the brain and gives the head its shape. But it also means that if there's a problem with that fusion, it can affect the shape of the skull.
I see. So it's all about finding that perfect balance between flexibility for birth and then strength and protection later on. Now, picture this. The base of your skull as this incredibly busy intersection with nerves and blood vessels zipping in and out.
I love that analogy. The base of the skull is actually divided into 3 cranial fossa, which are basically depressions that house different parts of the brain. You've got the anterior, middle, and posterior fossa, each with its own specific role.
And those foramina, the holes I see in the skull illustrations are like exits and entrances for all those important structures, right?
Precisely. Think of the optic canal, for example. That's where the optic nerve and the ophthalmic artery pass through. They carry visual information and a fresh supply of blood to the eye. Then there's the foramen magnum. Magnum meaning large.
Makes sense. That's the biggest hole at the base of the skull. Isn't that where the spinal cord connects to the brain?
Exactly. It's the critical pathway for communication between the brain and the rest of the body.
Wow.
Every single foramen has a specific job to do, ensuring that everything stays connected and functioning properly. It's like a perfectly organized transportation system.
Fascinating. Okay, before we move on, can we talk about facial expressions? I've always wondered how many muscles it takes to make a genuine smile versus, say, a grimace of disgust.
It's more than you might think. The face is capable of expressing a huge range of emotions thanks to its complex network of muscles.
Let's not forget about all that subcutaneous tissue under the skin of the face. You know, the fat pads, blood vessels, and sensory nerves.
You're right. Those fat pads give babies those adorable chubby cheeks.
And the blood vessels are why we blush when we're embarrassed or excited.
Exactly. And those sensory nerves are why we feel everything on our face, from a gentle breeze to a kiss.
Okay, but back to those muscles. What are some of the key players in our facial expressions?
We'll take the orbicularis oculi, for example. It encircles the eye, allowing us to blink, squint, and even wink.
Uh-huh.
It's the muscle that lets you express skepticism with a raised eyebrow or concentration with a furrowed brow.
It's like the multitasker of facial expressions. What about a genuine smile?
That's the job of the zygomaticus major. It lifts the corners of your mouth up and out. You can't fake a real smile because this muscle is only activated when you're truly feeling happy.
So it's like our faces are masterpieces of evolutionary engineering, designed to express every possible emotion from hangry to totally in love.
I like that. It's true. We communicate so much through our facial expressions.
We've admired the surface of the face. Now let's peek beneath the surface at something we often take for granted, the scalp.
Okay.
It might seem simple, but the scalp is actually quite complex. It has 5 distinct layers. Wait, 5 layers? That's more than I expected.
It is. But there's a handy mnemonic to remember them. CLP, S for skin, the outermost layer, C for connective tissue, a dense layer full of blood vessels, A for aponeurosis, a sheet-like tendon, L for loose connective tissue, and finally P for periosteum, the membrane that covers the skull bone.
That's actually pretty easy to remember. So that second layer, the connective tissue, it's packed with blood vessels, right? That explains why scalp wounds bleed so much.
Exactly. Seems like every time I get a little nick on my scalp, I bleed like crazy. But knowing about that dense network of blood vessels makes it less of a mystery.
And that loose connective tissue layer, what's its role?
Well, it allows for movement of the scalp,
Hmm.
but it can also be a pathway for infections to spread. And it's also why fluid can accumulate near the eyes after a head injury.
Wow, I never thought about that. It seems like understanding the structure of the scalp could be really important for treating injuries. It's not just skin deep, that's for sure. Okay, let's move down from the scalp to the neck. What can you tell me about the anatomy of this region?
Well, imagine your neck like a map divided into key regions marked by triangles. These are the anterior and posterior triangles of the neck, and they're created by that big muscle we talked about earlier, the sternocleidomastoid.
That's the muscle that runs from behind your ear down to your collarbone, right?
Exactly. Now, in that posterior triangle, behind the sternocleidomastoid, we have some interesting characters like the external jugular vein.
The vein that really pops out when you're working out or straining.
That's the one. And there's the spinal accessory nerve, which controls the muscles that shrug your shoulders and turn your head.
Surgeons need to be extra careful not to damage that nerve during procedures in the neck, right?
Absolutely. Damaging that nerve could lead to weakness or paralysis of those muscles. And then there's the phrenic nerve, which you might know better for its connection to hiccups.
Oh, that's interesting. What about the anterior triangle?
It's like a celebrity hotspot. It houses the carotid arteries, those vital blood vessels supplying the brain, the thyroid gland, which regulates your metabolism, and the larynx, also known as the voice box.
Wow. It's amazing how much is packed into those triangles. So we've talked about muscles, bones, nerves, and even glands. But what's holding it all together? I mean, it's not just floating around in there, right?
You're right. There's a hidden support system that often gets overlooked. It's called fascia.
Fascia. I've heard that word before, but I'm not exactly sure what it is.
Think of fascia as a type of connective tissue that surrounds and supports every structure in your body. It's like a three-dimensional web that keeps everything organized and connected. It's not just muscles and bones doing all the work. Fascia plays a key role, too.
So it's like the glue that holds everything together. Is there different types of fascia?
Absolutely. In the neck, there are three main layers of deep fascia: the investing fascia, the pretracheal fascia, and the prevertebral fascia. Each layer surrounds different groups of muscles and structures, creating compartments within the neck.
And I remember you mentioning the carotid sheath earlier. Is that related to fascia?
Yes, the carotid sheath is a specialized thickening of fascia that wraps around the carotid artery, the internal jugular vein, and the vagus nerve. It's like a protective sleeve for these vital structures as they travel through the neck.
Wow, that's fascinating. So fascia creates compartments, supports structures, and even acts as a protective barrier. It's way more important than I realized. It makes me wonder how understanding these different layers of fascia could help doctors during surgery.
It's absolutely crucial for surgeons to be aware of the fascial layers. Knowing how they divide the neck into compartments helps them navigate safely during procedures and minimize the risk of complications.
Right.
It also influences how infections might spread.
That makes sense. Knowing the anatomy of the neck isn't just interesting, it's essential for medical professionals. It's incredible to see how seemingly simple bumps and grooves on our necks are actually landmarks that guide life-saving interventions.
It really highlights the intricate and interconnected nature of the human body.
This is just the beginning of our journey. In part 2, we'll delve into the fascinating realms of the nasal region and oral cavity, exploring how we breathe, smell, taste, and speak.
It's going to be a sensory adventure.
Until then, keep exploring your own anatomy and stay curious.
Welcome back to our anatomical deep dive. In part 1, we explored those palpable landmarks of the head and neck, like a roadmap guiding us through the body's intricate pathways.
Right.
We even cracked open the skull, figuratively of course, to uncover its hidden secrets.
It's amazing how much we can learn just by feeling the structures beneath our skin and understanding how they relate to those deeper hidden parts. Exactly. And now we're going even deeper into the head, exploring the fascinating realms of the nasal region and the oral cavity. Get ready for a sensory adventure as we uncover the secrets of breathing, smelling, tasting, and speaking.
These functions might seem simple, but they rely on an intricate interplay of structures working together seamlessly.
Let's start with the nose. I know it's more than just a prominent feature on our face. It's the gateway to our respiratory system and the organ responsible for our sense of smell.
You're right. The external nose, the part we see, is shaped by both bone and cartilage. The bridge of your nose is formed by the paired nasal bones, and the sides get their shape from the frontal processes of the maxilla.
And those flexible parts of the nose, the ones we can wiggle a bit, those are the cartilages, right? I remember there are a few different types.
Yes, we have the lateral cartilages, the alar cartilages, which form the nostrils, and the septal cartilage. That last one is particularly important because it forms the front part of the nasal septum, the wall that divides the nasal cavity into two chambers.
So it's like the nose has its own internal scaffolding, giving it shape and support. What about the nasal cavity itself? What's going on inside those two chambers?
The nasal cavity is a surprisingly complex space. The nasal bones form the roof. The hard palate makes up the floor, and the sides are formed by the maxilla and the ethmoid bones.
And what about those bony projections I see on the sides of the nasal cavity in the illustrations? They kind of look like shells.
Those are the nasal conchae, and they play a crucial role in preparing the air we breathe. They create turbulence in the airflow, which helps to warm, humidify, and filter the air before it reaches the lungs.
It's like the nose has its own built-in air conditioning and purification system.
Yeah,
So even before air reaches our lungs, it's already been treated.
exactly. The conchae also increase the surface area of the nasal cavity, which enhances our sense of smell. And they create spaces called metaces, basically passageways that connect to the paranasal sinuses.
Wait, the sinuses, as in the things that can cause so much trouble when we have a cold.
Those are the ones.
Mm-hmm.
But when they're not inflamed, the paranasal sinuses actually serve several important functions. They help to lighten the skull, add resonance to our voice, and produce mucus that helps to trap foreign particles.
So it's like our sinuses have a dual personality. They can be troublemakers when we're sick, but they're also essential for everyday function. Can you remind me where these sinuses are located?
We have the frontal sinuses above the eyes in the frontal bone. The maxillary sinuses are the largest and are located in the cheekbones. Then there are the ethmoid sinuses, which are a group of small air cells between the eyes. And finally, the sphenoid sinuses located deep within the skull.
It's incredible to think that we have these air-filled cavities within our skull bones. Okay, let's move on from the nose and take a closer look at the mouth. It's not just the gateway to our digestive system, but it's also crucial for taste and speech.
The oral cavity is a fascinating space. It's bounded by the lips in front, the oropharynx in back, that's the part of the throat behind the mouth, the palate above, and the floor of the mouth below.
Let's break that down, starting with the lips. Those fleshy folds are essential for so many things, from speaking and eating to expressing emotions.
The lips are made up of muscle fibers, connective tissue, and a rich network of blood vessels which gives them their pink color. Interestingly, the skin on the lips is different from the skin on the rest of our body. It lacks hair follicles and sweat glands.
That explains why we need lip balm.
Yeah.
Our lips don't have the same natural lubrication as the rest of our skin. What about the cheeks? I know they help us chew and manipulate food, but I'm guessing they're more than just passive pouches.
You're right. The cheeks are primarily composed of the buccinator muscle, a thin, flat muscle that helps to compress the cheeks against the teeth during chewing. It's what helps us keep food from falling out of our mouths when we're eating.
And then there are the gums, also known as the gingiva, which provide a protective covering for our teeth.
The gingiva is a tough, fibrous tissue that's tightly attached to the teeth and the underlying bone. It acts like a barrier, preventing bacteria and food particles from getting into the deeper tissues and causing damage.
Okay, on to the tongue. It's responsible for taste, speech, and maneuvering food around in our mouths. It's one busy organ.
The tongue is incredibly versatile thanks to its complex muscular structure. It's covered with thousands of taste buds that allow us to perceive sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami, that savory, meaty flavor.
I've always wondered, how does the tongue move so effortlessly?
It's because it has both intrinsic and extrinsic muscles. The intrinsic muscles are located within the tongue itself and change its shape, while the extrinsic muscles connect the tongue to the surrounding structures, allowing for a wide range of movements.
And lastly, let's talk about the palate. It forms the roof of the mouth and separates the oral cavity from the nasal cavity.
The palate is divided into two parts. The hard palate, which is bony, makes up the front portion, and the soft palate, which is muscular, forms the back part.
The hard palate is that part you can feel with your tongue, right? It's formed by the palatine processes of the maxillae and the horizontal plates of the palatine bones.
That's right. And the soft palate is a mobile flap that hangs down from the back edge of the hard palate. It plays a crucial role in swallowing and speech.
And the uvula, that little teardrop-shaped thing that hangs down from the middle of the soft palate. What's its purpose? I remember learning about it in school, but I can't recall its function.
Its function is still debated, but it likely helps to prevent food from going up into the nasal cavity when we swallow. It's also thought to play a role in speech by helping to shape certain sounds.
So we've got the lips, cheeks, gums, tongue, and palate all working together to help us eat, speak, and experience the world through taste. It's amazing how each structure has its own unique role to play.
It's a testament to the intricate design of the human body. But there's more to the oral cavity than just those structures. We also have the salivary glands, which play a vital role in digestion and oral health.
The salivary glands, those are the ones that produce saliva, right? I know saliva helps to moisten food, making it easier to swallow, but does it have other functions?
Saliva does a lot more than you might think. It contains enzymes that start breaking down carbohydrates, and it also helps to neutralize acids in the mouth, protecting our teeth from decay.
So saliva is kind of like a superhero fighting off bad guys in our mouths. Can you tell me more about the different salivary glands?
There are three pairs of major salivary glands: the parotid glands, the submandibular glands, and the sublingual glands. The parotid glands are the largest and are located in front of and below the ears.
That explains why they swell up when someone has the mumps.
Exactly. The mumps virus targets the parotid glands. The submandibular glands, as their name suggests, are located beneath the mandible or lower jaw. And the sublingual glands, the smallest of the three, are situated beneath the tongue.
It's fascinating how each pair of glands has its own specific location and produces a slightly different type of saliva. It's like a team effort working together to keep our mouths healthy and functioning properly. What happens after we swallow? I know the food travels down the throat, but where does it go from there?
The throat, also known as the pharynx, serves as a passageway for both food and air. It's a muscular tube that connects the nasal and oral cavities to the larynx and esophagus.
So it's a crossroads for both our respiratory and digestive systems. That seems like it could get complicated. How does the body keep everything moving in the right direction?
The pharynx is actually divided into three parts: the nasopharynx, the oropharynx, and the laryngopharynx. The nasopharynx is the uppermost part located behind the nasal cavity.
That's where the eustachian tubes open, right? Those tubes that connect the middle ear to the nasopharynx and help to equalize pressure in the middle ear.
You're exactly right. The oropharynx, the middle part of the pharynx, sits right behind the oral cavity. It's a common passageway for both food and air. And it's where we find the palatine tonsils, those masses of lymphoid tissue that help to fight off infection.
So the tonsils are like guards protecting our bodies from invaders. And the laryngopharynx, that's the last stop before the food goes down the hatch, right?
Yes, the laryngopharynx is the lowermost part of the pharynx. It's where the pharynx divides into the larynx, the voice box in the front, and the esophagus, the food tube in the back. During swallowing, a flap of cartilage called the epiglottis covers the opening to the larynx, ensuring that food goes down the esophagus and not into the airway.
It's amazing how the body coordinates all of that without us even thinking about it. We swallow, we breathe, we speak, and it all happens seamlessly. What about the larynx itself? Can you tell me more about this voice-producing organ?
The larynx is a fascinating structure. It's composed of several cartilages, including the thyroid cartilage, the cricoid cartilage, and the arytenoid cartilages.
The thyroid cartilage, that's the one that forms the Adam's apple, right?
Exactly. It's the largest cartilage in the larynx. The cricoid cartilage is a ring-shaped cartilage that sits below the thyroid cartilage, and the arytenoid cartilages are paired structures that attach to the vocal folds, also known as the vocal cords.
The vocal folds are the structures that vibrate to produce sound, right?
Precisely. They're two pearly white bands of tissue that stretch across the larynx. When we speak or sing, air from the lungs is forced through the vocal folds, causing them to vibrate and produce sound. The length and tension of the vocal folds determine the pitch of our voice.
It's incredible to think that such a small structure can produce such a wide range of sounds. And we can control the pitch and volume of our voice by adjusting the tension and airflow. It's like our own personal musical instrument.
I like that analogy. And as we mentioned earlier, the larynx also plays a vital role in protecting the airway during swallowing. The epiglottis acts like a trap door flipping down to cover the opening of the larynx and prevent food from going down the wrong type.
Okay, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, can we take a quick detour to talk about the thyroid gland? I know it's located in the neck, and I've heard it's incredibly important for our overall health.
Absolutely. The thyroid gland might be small, but it plays a powerful role in regulating our metabolism growth and development. It's located in the front of the neck just below the larynx, and it has a distinctive butterfly shape.
What exactly does the thyroid gland do?
It produces hormones, primarily thyroxine, also known as T4, and triiodothyronine, or T3. These hormones control how our body uses energy, makes proteins, and even how sensitive we are to other hormones.
So it's like the thyroid gland is the conductor of our body's orchestra, making sure everything is in sync and running smoothly.
That's a great way to put it. The thyroid gland is essential for maintaining overall health and well-being.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our anatomical adventure, from the nose and its air-filtering conchae to the tongue's taste buds and the voice-producing larynx.
And we can't forget about those salivary glands and the intricate workings of the pharynx. It's amazing how these structures work together seamlessly to allow us to breathe, smell, taste, speak, and swallow.
It really highlights the interconnected nature of our body's systems. In the final part of our deep dive, we'll be exploring the fascinating world of the senses, taking a closer look at the eye and ear, and even venturing into the control center of it all, the brain.
Stay tuned for more anatomical discoveries.
Welcome back to the final part of our anatomical deep dive. We started this journey with the familiar landmarks of the head and neck, then ventured into the hidden worlds of the nasal region and the oral cavity.
We've uncovered how these intricate structures work together to allow us to breathe, smell, taste, speak, and swallow.
It's been amazing. Now prepare to be wowed as we explore the incredible organs responsible for our senses of sight and hearing, the eye and the ear.
These sensory powerhouses are constantly taking in information from the world around us, shaping our experiences and how we perceive reality.
Let's begin with the eye, that remarkable organ that captures light and transforms it into the images we see. It's like having a built-in camera.
The eye is truly a marvel of engineering. It's nestled safely within the bony orbit, a protective socket formed by 7 different skull bones. Think of it as a fortress guarding our precious sense of sight.
7 bones just to protect the eye. It must be really important.
It is, and within that fortress lies the eyeball itself, a complex structure with multiple layers, each with its own specific function.
Okay, let's peel back those layers. What's the outermost layer?
The outermost layer is called the fibrous tunic. It includes the sclera, the white part of the eye that gives the eyeball its shape and protects the delicate structures inside.
And the cornea, that clear dome at the front of the eye, it always looks so shiny and smooth.
The cornea is remarkable. It's transparent, allowing light to enter the eye, and it's curved, which means it helps to bend or refract light as it passes through. That's the first step in focusing those light rays onto the retina.
So the cornea acts like a lens, helping to create a sharp image. What's next?
The middle layer is called the vascular tunic, also known as the uvea. It includes the choroid, which is full of blood vessels that supply nutrients to the retina.
And the ciliary body, what does that do?
The ciliary body contains muscles that control the shape of the lens, that transparent structure behind the iris. By changing the shape of the lens, the eye can adjust its focus, allowing us to see both near and far objects clearly. This process is called accommodation.
So the ciliary body is like the eye's focusing mechanism, making sure we can see both the details up close and the bigger picture further away.
Exactly. Now let's move to the innermost layer, the retina. This is where the magic happens. The retina contains those specialized photoreceptor cells, rods and cones, that convert light into the electrical signals our brain interprets as vision.
It's like the retina is the eye's movie screen, capturing the light and projecting the images. What's the difference between rods and cones? I remember learning about them in school.
Rods are responsible for vision in low light conditions. They allow us to see shapes and movement in dim environments, but they don't perceive color. Cones, on the other hand, are responsible for color vision and visual acuity, the sharpness of our vision. They function best in brighter light.
So cones are what let us see those vibrant colors and fine details when the lighting is good, while rods help us navigate in the dark.
Precisely. And once light hits those photoreceptor cells, they convert it into electrical signals that are sent to the brain via the optic nerve.
It's incredible how this complex process happens in an instant, without us even having to think about it. We just open our eyes and see.
The eye is a true marvel. But it's not just about the eyeball itself. We also have those accessory structures that play important roles in protecting and maintaining the eye.
Like the eyelids and eyelashes. They always seem so delicate, but I know they have an important job to do.
The eyelids are like shields protecting the eye from foreign objects and helping to distribute tears evenly across the surface. Eyelashes act as a first line of defense, trapping dust and debris before it can reach the eye.
And tears themselves are fascinating. They're not just for crying. They help to lubricate the eye, keeping it moist and comfortable.
That's right. Tears also help to wash away irritants and provide oxygen and nutrients to the cornea. The lacrimal glands located above the outer corner of each eye are responsible for producing tears.
This might seem like a strange question, but what happens to tears when we cry? I mean, they don't just stay on our face forever.
That's a great question. Tears drain through small openings called lacrimal puncta located at the inner corner of the eyelids. From there, they travel through tiny canals into the lacrimal sac and finally into the nasolacrimal duct, which empties into the nasal cavity.
That explains why our nose runs when we cry. It's all connected.
Exactly. Now let's shift our focus from vision to hearing and dive into the world of the ear.
Okay, I'm ready. I know the ear is more than just that outer structure we see on the side of our head. It's actually a complex organ divided into 3 parts.
That's right. We have the external ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. The external ear consists of the auricle or pinna, that's the fleshy part we see, and the external auditory canal, which is the tube-like structure that leads to the middle ear.
I always thought it was interesting how the shape of the auricle helps to funnel sound waves into the ear canal. It's like a little satellite dish capturing those sound waves.
And the external auditory canal isn't just an empty tube. It contains glands that produce cerumen, better known as earwax.
Earwax often gets a bad rap, but I know it actually serves a purpose.
Absolutely. Earwax helps to protect the ear from dirt, debris, and even insects. It also helps to lubricate the ear canal.
So earwax is actually a good thing. What about the middle ear?
The middle ear is an air-filled cavity that houses those three tiny bones we talked about earlier, the malleus, the intus, and the stapes. They're also known as the auditory ossicles.
I remember those. They're some of the smallest bones of the body. What do they do?
The auditory ossicles are responsible for transmitting sound vibrations from the eardrum, also called the tympanic membrane, to the inner ear. The malleus is attached to the eardrum. The incus connects the malleus to the stapes, and the stapes is attached to the oval window, which is a membrane-covered opening leading into the inner ear.
So it's like a chain reaction with each bone vibrating the next one in line.
Exactly. And this chain reaction amplifies the sound vibrations, making them strong enough to stimulate the hair cells in the inner ear.
Okay, let's talk about the inner ear, the most complex part of the ear.
The inner ear is a fluid-filled labyrinth that contains the cochlea, the vestibule, and the semicircular canals.
I've always been fascinated by the cochlea. It has such a unique spiral shape.
The cochlea is where sound vibrations are transformed into electrical signals that the brain can understand. It contains thousands of tiny hair cells that are stimulated by the movement of fluid caused by those sound vibrations.
So the cochlea is like the ear's translator, converting sound waves into a language the brain can comprehend.
That's a great way to put it. And the vestibule and semicircular canals, what do you think those structures do?
I remember learning that they're involved in our sense of balance and spatial orientation.
You're exactly right. The vestibule detects linear acceleration, like when we're moving forward or backward, while the semicircular canals detect rotational acceleration, like when we tilt our head or spin around.
So it's thanks to these structures that we can maintain our balance walk without falling over and even ride a roller coaster without getting completely disoriented.
It's incredible, isn't it? Our senses of sight and hearing rely on these remarkably intricate organs that seamlessly convert external stimuli into signals our brain can understand.
This has been an amazing journey exploring the anatomy of the head and neck. We've gone from palpable landmarks to hidden highways, uncovering the secrets of how we breathe, smell, taste, speak, and even maintain our balance.
It's been a privilege to share these anatomical wonders with you. I hope this deep dive has given you a newfound appreciation for the intricate design and remarkable capabilities of the human body.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe this has sparked a passion for anatomy in some of our listeners. There's always more to learn and explore.
Stay curious.
Until next time, keep exploring, and thanks for joining us on this deep dive.